We're the book friends that think good.
What does this mean for our life, for our world? Yiggity yeet, my dude. I'm happy to speak. Always happy to think.
I don't know how to do that. I can look into that.
Makes you sound like a book friend that can think good.
It's Jack and it's Weston.
BFTTGs. Yeah.
Jack, I think good. Sometimes I good think, too.
Makes you sound pretty good.
We might want to make it more concise. We are going to attempt to grapple and answer 3 questions. Number 1, what did we learn? Number 2, what did we disagree with? And number 3, what are we going to do about it? I am ready to roll.
I'm in it. Weston, my book friend, tell me, what book is it that we're thinking good about today?
Sip it. Drink
Sip
it down.
Gotta get my tea. Today, we are talking about Chapter 15 of Field Guide to Lies and Statistics, which is titled 4 Case Studies. Jack, what are the case studies in this chapter?
Oh, well, Weston, I'm glad that you brought that up. First, there is the case of Shadow, the wonder dog, having cancer, or does he? The second case study is called Were Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin thespians? Then statistics on stage, parentheses, and in a box. And the final case study, this one is long, but the final case study is statistics in the universe. And I thought one thing we could do is put the field guide to the test and take a look at these 4 case studies and say, did the field guide help us in coming to conclusions about these cases? What do you think, Weston?
Let's do it.
Okay, so first of all, Shadow the Wonder Dog has cancer, or does he? In this case study, essentially Levitin sets out the case of his family dog Shadow, who was 13 and was not diagnosed with, but suspected of having a disease. And let me see what the disease was. Again, TCC, transitional cell carcinoma. So the idea is he may have a tumor obstructing his bladder or affecting his bladder. But there are all of these different strategies that the veterinarians could have employed to save Shadow. And the question was, how do we decide what is best to do? Now, what did you think of this case study, Weston? What would you have done?
I would have put it down.
Put the dog down?
Yeah, I definitely would have been in that category, putting the dog down.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I will admit, though, I'm not as emotionally attached to pets as some people. And I think that is in large part due to my childhood.
Yeah.
I know Jack's heard the story, but basically my family went through like a dozen pets in like just 3 or 4 years. We had like a variety of guinea pigs that all died. And we had a bird that flew away after one day. We had a couple of hamsters that died pretty quickly. We had a fish that my mom killed on accident because she put too cold of water in there. Yeah. So we didn't have great, like we got a cat.
Not the best.
I'm shocked that we got a cat after all of that. We got a cat and then we were unable to take care of it as a family and we had to give it away.
I think... I don't know. I think I'm kind of in the same camp as you, honestly, because what Levitin sets out is basically 6 options. One is put Shadow to sleep right now, recognizing there's nothing you can. He doesn't have long to live anyway. He has bladder cancer. Option 5 is do nothing. Now I know a lot of people who would just say do nothing. So you're definitely not in that camp with your answer, but. Number 1 through 4 were all different like medical procedures that had different like life expectancies. And Levitin's solution to this is to dissect it probabilistically and mathematically and pat himself on the back.
I was shocked we didn't see a Punnett square here.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, no 4x. But kind of like pats himself on the back for like we got the most, like a much longer return on treatment than I expected. And that just, to me, see, this is where I feel like the field guide doesn't always lead us to the kind of conclusions that I would want to make. Because my conclusion is the same as yours. Put Shadow down. He's got intense cancer. It sounds like they were just visiting him in the hospital because he was like in this like dog hospital having all these tests run and stuff.
That was the part that really made me decide to put him down, because I'm like, yo, I would not let a dying dog financially burden my family. So I was like, dude, they're like in a dog hospital doing all these tests and stuff. I'm like, who knows how much money that's costing them? And like, I'm sorry to say that, but it's like, dude, if the dog is going to die in 3 months anyway, I don't know if I'm going to do all that. I think actually, you know what? I think I might do nothing and just like let him live as long as, well, see, because then I don't know. I don't want him to be walking around in pain.
Suffering. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that's really tough about ethics with pets, is they're very different than ethics with humans, but they really reflect what we think about life. And the question is life about the number of days that you live, or is it about the quality of those days? And that's what I think this really comes down to for me, is like the quality of his days is deteriorating regardless.
Yeah.
Significantly and rapidly.
Yeah.
That to me,
so
I don't know.
I don't know if you've ever joked, but an inside joke, I guess, between my wife and I, it's pretty morbid, is like we talk about who will die first.
Yeah. Sure.
And I've also made comments like as soon as I can't make a free throw, put me down. Or like something like that, you know? Like I made comments like that where it's like if my quality of my life, or we've had the conversation of like if one of us gets in I don't know, God forbid, an accident or something.
Serious accident.
And
sure.
We're like a vegetable, no brain. Like how long will we stay? And I tell my wife, I'm like, pull the plug. I'm like, pull it on me. Don't weigh yourself down. So I don't know. It's kind of a harsh view, I guess.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's helpful to have those conversations, though. But what you would do in those dire situations, because, like, I don't know, nobody likes to think about that stuff. But one of the things that happens, one of the things that happens immediately is you're forced to make practical decisions very quickly. Like I watched this happen with my aunt after my uncle died of cancer, which is, expected, but still very sad. But I mean, the practical things hit you like a ton of bricks when you're grieving. And it's nice to have already thought through some of that. So that makes sense. But also, I think the greater point stands because what you're touching on is quality of life. You're touching on like what, and this is one of those things that we have consistently said about this book as like a pushback that, my pushback to this case is the outcome. Like the outcome for him is like max number of days. We did it. Yes. We got the most days that we possibly could out of our dog. And I just feel like that's more of like a decision that you make about like a car. Like we got as many miles out of it as we possibly could. Yeah. Not necessarily like a living being, but I don't know. That's just my thought.
I mean, yeah, it's just okay. So the other thing I thought about the first case study is, I feel like this is the first time he's kind of offered a sliver of hope, where he's like looked at this case and been like, well, I don't know. I guess not, because he kind of still went with what the best odds were, right? But it's like he's still showing us like a slim case. Like this was not a. It's like he's showing us an outlier. So I felt like he was showing us a glimmer of hope into like.
Yeah. The statistics aren't all there is to the story.
I thought I took away more that like he's trying to say statistics are
all there is to a story. But
will benefit you even in slim chances like that.
yeah,
Um,
no,
I
that's
don't
true.
know. I don't know if I
That's true.
agree with that because he presented a case deeply
Yeah.
personal to him, and that's like, and it's just a rare case.
Yeah. Well, and kudos to him for, you know, slicing and dicing this when you have an important decision to make. Because I think that is an area where this kind of thinking comes into play. Like, you know, if you're practicing these skills when you have an important decision like this to make that affects your life or somebody else's or your dog's, right? Like you're like, okay, well, what are the tools in my toolkit? I can pull those out to like help aid in this decision making process. And he walked through that, and I think a way that you know, I've heard a lot of people with cancer, like there's not just like there's rarely a binary solution. It's rarely like either do this or don't do this. It's usually like, well, we have like 5 or 6 different things we could do. So yeah, I think it was a good example, a good case study. Number 2, were Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin thespians? The crux of this case study is the moon landing real? And of course, we all know that it isn't. But
Fake.
yeah, right. And we're still facing the consequences of that little fib. I'm just kidding. No, okay, so moon landing. This is essentially one where he applies the plausibility factor really hard. But what do you think? Were you convinced by the evidence he presents here?
No, I'm not convinced with his evidence because I feel like he relies too much on like big tech.
Yeah,
Like,
just because like the justification is like, well, listen, NASA says this happened.
yeah.
It's like, okay, of course NASA says it happened. They're the ones who are motivated to make it happen.
Right.
They who were directed by the president to make it happen, or else.
Yep. So, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's definitely very suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that makes it very suspicious is that it's like not been done again. Because usually when people do amazing things, lots of other people try
Do
and
them.
do it too.
Yeah,
And
it
then
is
the
kind of
success
interesting.
rate increases.
One of the things that what I like about this case study is that it's a counter knowledge case study. It's a conspiracy theory case study. And that's exactly the kind of thing that I was hoping this book would probe into. And like what made me interested in this book to start with was like conspiratorial thinking and like how that's like ballooned in our age. But he has a line on page 230. Part of what keeps counter knowledge going is the sheer number of unanswered questions that keep popping up like a game of whack-a-mole. I think that that's kind of interesting. Like the burden of proof is to prove that something happened, not that something didn't happen. So you can come up with things forever to say that something didn't happen. Much easier to prove that something did happen.
Think it was real then?
I'm not going to get into that. So, no, I'm just kidding. No, I don't know. I think that I think this case study left me kind of hanging, left me feeling sort of like, I don't know if there was enough. He seems to wrap it up like, so of course, the moon landing happened. But I'm like, he says the weight of evidence overwhelmingly points to the moon landing being real, but he presents just like a couple of things. And I don't know, I didn't find them terribly convincing.
That's kind of how I felt. I was like, I didn't feel like his argument was any better than the conspiracy theory.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, what does he say? Says something like, okay, this aerospace worker, in quotes, was not trained in engineering or science. They had a BA in English and worked at Rocketdyne. And it's like, so the solution is an ad hominem attack on this person's like base of knowledge. Like that doesn't seem like a reasonable reason to assume that they just don't know what they're talking about.
I agree. I feel like he falls prey to a lot of his
own principles.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of those fallacies that he talks about. Where he just like, yeah, it's like you said, he kind of just acts like some of the things he says should just be taken as he said them, but then he acts like so many other things need to be critically looked at. So it's like, well, wait, what are you actually telling me to do? Because if I look at your facts the same way that you tell me to look at other people's facts, I see a lot of things to question.
Yeah. And you know what? To his credit, maybe he has no problem with that. He's like, good. You're critically thinking. You're not just assuming what I say is true. Because he literally did that with the quotes that one time. Okay, case 3. Statistics on stage and in a box. This is about David Blaine and whether the things that he claims to do in his stunts, like holding his breath for 17 minutes underwater or fasting for 44 days in a glass box, if he's actually doing those things or if they're magic tricks. What did you think? This is an interesting one to me.
I had a one-word response to this section. And?
That's funny. I'm like, ooh, interesting. And you're like, who cares?
Well, it's like, it's meant to be fake, right? Like, they admit that it's fake.
It's for entertainment.
Yeah.
Like, the purpose is entertainment.
Yeah, so, like, what are we talking about? Like, I don't get it, so.
That does bring up another one of my pushbacks to the book in general, and just something that we've talked about in past chapters, which is like, yes, you could critically think about this. You could slice and dice it. You could fact check it. But do you really care?
Yeah.
Does it really matter if David Blaine held his breath for 18 minutes or not?
Yeah.
And one of the guys who is interviewed says that it does matter. I think one of the magicians, maybe. I'm not sure. Could have been one of the experts in holding your breath underwater. But they said, like, it is problematic because, like, other people will just accept stuff and, like, people will replicate this stuff at home and get injured, even though it says don't do this at home. Like, that's it's actually a good reason to think, like, that this does matter.
For which purpose? Like, for its intended purpose? Because it's like, I think you're arguing, and I'm not saying your argument's wrong, but you're arguing for, like, an unintended consequence.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's like, is that really in... If we only acted knowing what all the unintended consequences were, why would we ever make mistakes?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that's a valid reason to... I don't know.
Yeah, the unknown unknowns. Those are the hidden shoals, right? That's kind of how I felt about this case study too. The interesting thing is that it took up the most ink. Like, which is something I think to pay attention to. It's like, how much ink is spent today? Just content. Talking about things that are inconsequential.
Like, you mean like newspapers and like random tabloids and...
Oh yeah, dude. Just podcasts.
And ink is like, yeah, exactly. All the ink we use. And
yeah.
Ink is so pricey nowadays too.
Yeah. Printer ink?
Yeah, dude. It's like worth more than its weight in
inflation's
gold.
hit the ink market.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I've heard that gold is worth its weight in money.
What? You cannot be serious.
Yeah, let's slice and dice it. Okay, last one. Statistics in the universe. Statistics in the universe, we're talking about whether the Higgs boson particle is real or not. And will it clarify and solidify everything that we believe about the periodic table of elements, or will it shake things up in a big, big way? But not existing.
What? What did you think? What did you think of this one? This case study?
I thought it's an interesting dilemma that he brought up. And I think it may be the only one of the case studies where he really probes into motivation. I think that is a really important factor. It's something that we've like criticized a couple of times in the book, is like, he makes the case that like some scientists are motivated to discover this because it's like exciting and it could like wrap up neatly like 100 years of work, basically, in the scientific community. But he also makes the case that like some scientists will be inclined to try to disprove this because they want like new novel things to happen, and it sort of like shuts down some further inquiry. And I thought like, that's really interesting. He doesn't talk about motivation a whole lot in the book, so I thought that was interesting.
I thought that he, for all of his pessimism throughout the book, he sure does give a very altruistic, intrinsic motivation to these scientists, where he thinks they're doing it all for the benefit of
science in one way or the other.
Science in general, right? And it's like, yes, there are. That's why they get in there. But I mean, come on now. Input article with real knowledge here. But I remember it being something like they offered a $10 million prize to figure out a way to make some like crazy strong material.
Yeah.
And it was they had like a competition. So
prize money for science. That's one of the confounding factors that could be out there. There are scientists. So scientists might be motivated to continue inquiring about the mysteries of the universe, or they may be motivated to wrap up those mysteries in a neat little package for the future benefit of all people, or they may be greedy little piggies who are looking to make $1 million.
Oink, oink, dude.
They might be lying weasels who are trying to advance their own agenda.
Yeah.
Yep. Agreed. Well, I do think it gets to a good point, which is like there are a lot of factors to look at when evaluating these things, and like every case is different. Like they will pull different things from the field guide. So I thought that was interesting. What do you think as we sort of wrap up this chapter? My question is, well, what do you do with this? Like after looking over these case studies, what did it leave you with?
I honestly don't know. I think what I said that I was going to take away from the chapter was just a sliver of hope.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I would say just to continue probing. Like I think similarly, it did give me a little bit of hope. I think he was the most optimistic in tone in this chapter that he was in the entire book. And he basically just was like, use your critical thinking skills, keep pushing. There's a lot of reasons to use them. And it did leave me kind of feeling that way. Like, okay, it's time to, keep honing those skills because they'll be useful in life. And I don't necessarily know how or when, but critical thinking is a useful thing to continue to like train our minds on.
Thank you for joining us, book friends. Next week on the BFTTG pod, Jack and Weston, they're thinking good some more with you, our book friends. Check out the show notes or the description, comment section for a link to the book and any articles that we talk about in the show. Bye-bye, book friends.
Bye for this time, guys.
Do a good thing today.
I love you.
Love you too, dude.